Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Kokabiel kills Issei? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Issei run well you still California. A woman's voice screamed at a child that was standing in front of her, but she was cut off by a sword, slitting her throat open. The woman made a few gagging noises, but she eventually stopped breathing. "Nuo? Mother?" The boy that the woman called Issei shouted, tears streaming down his eyes. The man that killed his mother and father soon turned his attention towards the small boy and gave a wicked grin. "Well boy, it seems that you will be joining your parents as well. But I'll make sure that you remember my name. Make sure that you never forget my name," the man said, standing tall with two black fatherly wings on his back. Issei couldn't say anything, nor could he move. He couldn't believe that at 7 years of age, he would meet his end. "My name is Kokabiel. Make sure you remember that in the afterlife," the man known as Kokabiel said, raising his sword in the air. Issei closed his eyes and waited for the impact. He felt a sharp pain on the right side of his face. Issei screamed like he has never screamed before. He was holding his right eye so he could try and stop the bleeding. Kokabiel then kicked the bow in the stomach, sending him across the room. Issei's back smashed on a nearby wall. Still alive. For a human, you don't die as easily. But that doesn't matter. I'll end your life now," Kokabiel said, approaching the fallen Issei. Issei could only watch as his death came closer and closer. Issei's life began flashing before his eyes. To the friends he made in school, to the grateful moments that he spent with his parents and the rest of the Haidu family. Kokabiel stood before the fallen boy. He grabbed him by the throat and pulled him up to his feet. Issei began choking by the sheer power behind Kokabiel's grip. Kokabiel then let go of Issei's neck. Before Issei's feet could touch the ground, Kokabiel decapitated Issei. Issei's severed head fell on the cold floor with a small thud, the same with his body. Kokabiel smirked at his handiwork and laughed. He then disappeared. Young one," a voice said within Issei's head. Issei's eyes snapped open and he found himself surrounded by flames. He looked up and saw what looked like to be a giant red dragon. "Who are you?" Issei asked weakly. "I go by the name of the Red Dragon Emperor, but since you are my new host, you can call me Ddraig," the giant dragon said. What do you mean by new host?" Issei asked. "I do not have much time to explain it to you. Right now I shouldn't be awake. I didn't usually do this with my previous hosts, but I'm willing to give you a second chance in life," Ddraig said. "You can bring me back to life." "How?" Issei asked. "With a little bit of magic, of course. But it will come with a price. I am willing to bring you back to life only if you give up your humanity. If I bring you back to life, you will no longer be human, but a hybrid of human and dragon," Ddraig said. "So all I have to do is give up my humanity?" Issei asked. Ddraig nodded. Issei looked around the area that he was in, but there was nothing but flames. He then turned back to Ddraig. I accept. I'll give up my humanity," Issei said. Ddraig nodded once more. Everything around them began to light up into a bright light. Issei shielded his eyes, but everything went black. 10 years later, Issei's eyes snapped open from his nightmare. He put a hand on his forehead and noticed that he was sweating. He pulled the blanket that was covering his body back and sat down on his bed, his face in his hands. He gave a long sigh. The same nightmare coming back to haunt him every single night. It never let him find peace. Neither do the voices in his head. The voices were screaming the same thing every single time. "IsseiXHarem, run as fast as you California. Remember my name in the afterlife. My name is Kokabiel." Issei gave a silent growl at the name of Kokabiel. He forced the voice to go quiet and he stood up from the bed. He exited his room and went straight to the bathroom. He stripped out of his clothes and entered the bath. When he was finished, he wore his school uniform. Before he exited the bathroom, he took a glance at the mirror. He ran a finger at the scar that ran across his right eye. His right eye was now blind, losing its natural brown color, and went to a light milky blue color. He then ran a finger at another scar that was on his neck. The scar that was formed when he was put back together by Ddraig. Issei sighed once more. He exited his bathroom and went downstairs to the kitchen. He made himself a bowl of rice with some orange juice. In a matter of seconds, Issei finished his breakfast. He put the glass and the bowl in the sink. He then went over to the living room and picked up his school bag. He had to thank his uncle. He was the one that enrolled him into the Kuo Academy, which was previously an all-girls school. His uncle also told them that he didn't like to talk very much, so the teacher will introduce him. Issei took his spare key into his pocket and exited his house. He locked the door and made his way to the Kuo Academy. He honestly didn't know what to expect. It's been 10 years since he's been to school. 10 years since the incident. 10 years of being nothing but an empty shell. During the past few years, he even wondered as to why he decided to live. Why did he ask Ddraig to revive him as a hybrid? Why didn't he choose to live his life in the afterlife with his parents? The answer is obvious, of course. He wanted revenge. He made a vow that if he finds Kokabiel, he will rip his head out. And it was something that he was surely going to do once he gets the chance. He looked to his left and saw a sign say Kuo Academy. He went past the gates and headed for the entrance to the school. He then saw a teacher with purple dark hair and dark purple lipstick waiting at the entrance. Once she saw him, she walked towards him. "Are you Highschool Issei?" the woman asked. Issei nodded. "I have been waiting for you. I am your teacher, Ms. Keiko. If you would please follow me and I will show you where your classroom is. I will also get a student to give you a full tour of the school later on," Ms. Keiko said. Issei nodded in understanding and followed Ms. Keiko inside the building. Once he entered, he made quite a first impression. All the people that were present were staring at him, specifically the scar on his eye. He closed his one eye and just ignored the stares and the whispers. Ms. Keiko stopped in front of the staff room. "Wait here, I have to get my stuff for the class," Ms. Keiko said, entering the staff room. Issei sighed and leaned back against the wall. He then heard footsteps coming towards him. He looked towards the sound and saw two students walking towards him. One was bald and had his eyes closed, while the other wore a pair of shady-looking glasses. They were both approaching Issei with smirks. "So, I hear that you're the transfer student. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Motohama," Motohama said while pushing his glasses up. "And my name is Mitsuda," Mitsuda said while opening his eyes. "And we are the perverted duo," they both said loudly, earning a couple of dirty looks from girls. Issei raised a brow at the two. He honestly could care less about who they were, but he knew something. They must be the two most hated people in this school, especially by the girls. Now, you may be asking yourself, why did these two approach me? Quite simple really, we want you to join us. Together, we will forge upon a new name, called the Perverted Trio. Motohama finished loudly again. Issei looked at a few people that were watching the situation. A lot of the girls were shaking their heads at him, as if saying please don't join them. While a few male students were nodding their heads, saying for him to join. But the answer was already clear for Issei. He looked at the two and shook his head. "So you don't want to join us, eh?" Motohama said, with his head down. "Oh well, one day you'll find it in your heart that the decision you made today was wrong and you'll come running back at us, pleading to join our group," Motohama said, confident in his words. Mitsuda agreed with him with a smirk of his own. "Mitsuda, Motohama. You two get to class right." Ms. Keiko was cut off by Issei, who put a finger on his lips and shushed her. Ms. Keiko looked at Issei with a curious expression. Issei then turned his attention at the perverted duo. Both of them just stared at him, not knowing what he was about to do. Issei glared at the two, which made them back off a bit. When Issei took a step forward, they took a step back. "Hey buddy, what are you going to do?" Motohama asked, scared by the glare that he was receiving from Issei. Issei said nothing as he continued to approach them. Finally, they remembered that if anything happened, it was still 2 against 1. Both of them smirked and stopped taking steps back. "You do realize that it's 2 versus 1 right here, don't ya?" Mitsuda said with a smirk. Issei then grabbed both of them from their throats and lifted them up from the ground, choking them. The students that were present were watching the scene with awe and shock by the power of the transfer student. Issei kept his glare on while choking the life out of the two boys. They both started to turn blue from the lack of oxygen and were about to pass out. "Highschool Issei, that is enough. You can let them go," Ms. Keiko said. Issei turned and faced her. With a small sigh, he let the perverted duo to live. They both fell to their knees, gasping for air while coughing heavily. "Alright man, we get you. We won't mess with you ever again," they both said as they ran away from Issei. Issei then turned his head towards Ms. Keiko. She gave a small sigh herself. "Even though I didn't approve of your way, I think this will tone those two perverts down a little. Also, try to avoid getting into fights, especially in school," she said. Now, let's get to class. The bell is about to." She was cut off by the sound of the bell going off. "Go off," she finished with a sigh. They both went to the second floor and walked down the corridor. After a few seconds, they stopped at a classroom with a sign to be on it. Ms. Keiko turned to look at Issei. "Okay, you wait out here. I'll call you in a minute," Ms. Keiko said. Issei nodded. Ms. Keiko opened the door to the classroom and closed it. Issei waited until his cue to enter. "Today, I would like to announce that we have a new student. You can enter now," Ms. Keiko shouted. Issei opened the door and walked in the classroom. He heard some whispers about him, like how he handled the perverted duo and about the 2 scars that were visible on his neck and face. Ms. Keiko cleared her throat, making the students to stop whispering. "Alright class, his name is Highschool Issei. He is 17 years old. The reason that I'm doing the introduction is because he rarely speaks. I would like you all to take care of him. And please don't go asking him about how he got his scars. He won't answer you, even if you tried," Ms. Keiko finished. Alright Issei, you can sit beside Aoi. Aoi, raise your hand. Ms. Keiko commanded the girl known as Aoi. The girl in the back put her hand up. She had brown hair with green eyes. Issei saw her and walked towards the empty desk at the back, near the window. Typical main anime character getting the sit near the window cliché. Alright everyone, take out your history books and turn to page 47, began Ms. Keiko. Issei took out his history book and opened it to page 47. He then looked out the window, already bored. He just wanted the day to end. The bell for lunch rang not too long ago. Issei was the first one to get up. He exited the classroom and went towards the bathroom. He knew where it was, since he passed it during the time when him and Ms. Keiko were going to the staff room. He entered the bathroom and opened the sinks. He splashed some water in his face and then looked at his reflection in the mirror. His reflection began to change into another figure. The figure had long black hair, a pale face and red eyes, with a smirk across his lips. Remember my name. My name is Kokabiel, Kokabiel, Kokabiel. The Kokabiel illusion kept saying his name again and again. Issei growled and punched the mirror, shattering it. He noticed that there were a few pieces of blood on the mirror, so he looked at his knuckles. There was a small cut on his hand. Issei sighed and licked the wound, cleaning it. The blood soon stopped. Issei exited the bathroom and headed towards the canteen. Once entering, he noticed that every table was taken, so his best choice was to eat outside or in his classroom. He decided to eat outside, since he liked the peace and quiet. He paid for his lunch, which was only 2 pieces of white bread. He exited the building and sat down by the nearest tree. He opened his first white bread and took a bite. His opinion on the school right now was pretty alright, despite a few annoying people here and there, like those 2 in the morning. He opened his second white bread. Before he could take a bite, he felt like someone was watching him. He looked in front of him and saw a small girl, sitting in the grass. From what Issei could tell, she had white hair with 2 cat clips on her. Once the girl realized that she was watching him, she stood up and walked away. Issei shrugged and continued to eat his lunch. He found it a little weird that she was staring at him, but he didn't care that much. Once he finished his seconds, he lied down on the grass and stared up at the clouds. He gave a small sigh of relief. Peace and quiet, just how he liked it. He then felt his eyelids beginning to close. As much as he didn't want to see the same nightmare over and over again, his urge to sleep was bigger. He fell into a deep slumber. At the old school building, and, checkmate. Looks like it's another lose for you Akeno. A redhead said with a smile. My. It seems I can't beat you at a game of chess Rias. How are you so good at it? Akeno asked with the same smile. Concentration, a good strategy and years of practice. Rias said. Do you think that you could give me some pointers in case of a rematch? Akeno asked. A master tends to keep his secrets. If you want to get good, then learn how to play the game. Rias said with a small smirk. Ah, Rias, that was mean. Akeno said with a smile on her face. Just then, the door opened and in stepped a short girl with white hair and gold eyes. I'm back, President Rias. The girl said in a monotone voice. How does the transfer student seem to you Kaneko? Does he pose a threat? Rias asked. He looks like he is about to snap, but other than that I don't think he's a threat. Kaneko said. Keep on monitoring him. I feel like at some point he might prove a valuable ally or a very dangerous foe. Rias said with a hand on her chin. Kaneko nodded and headed towards the exit. Rias stopped her. Kaneko, one more thing. I feel like the fallen angels may have taken an interest towards him. Follow him on his way home and see if a fallen approaches him. Rias said. Kaneko nodded once more and exited the room. My Rias, it seems like you have taken an interest in the boy. Akeno said with a smile. Yes. I feel like he's special. Rias said. Akeno said nothing and they both started playing a new game of chess. Back with Issei. Issei snapped his eyes open and leaned forwards. He was breathing heavily with sweat running down his forehead. He wiped his sweat on his shirt and stood up. He turned around to leave but collided with someone. The girl fell to the ground but Issei was still standing. He looked down and saw that the girl had long black hair and her eyes were violet. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going. The girl said. Issei didn't say anything, like usual, but he did offer his hand to the girl. The girl looked at his hand and hesitantly took it. Issei picked her up. Thank you. She said shyly. Issei nodded and started walking towards the entrance of the school. Wait. The girl shouted. Issei turned around and looked at her with a raised brow. You might not know me, but I do know you. I see you crossing the bridge on your way home. Your name is Issei, right? The girl asked. Issei looked at her suspiciously, but nodded his head slowly. My name is Yuumo Mono. Pleasure to meet you. She said with a small bow. Issei nodded once more and turned around. She stopped him again. Wait. I have something to ask you. She shouted. Issei sighed in irritation and turned to look at the Yuumo once more. Would you ever consider going on a date with me tomorrow? Yuma asked with a small blush on her face. Issei stood there thinking for a moment. Eventually, Issei shook his head. Why not? Are you busy tomorrow, she asked. Issei nodded once more. Then how about when school ends? Let's walk home together. She asked a little desperate. Issei sighed once more. There was no way she was going to take a no for an answer. Issei nodded his head. Really, thank you very much. See you when school ends. Meet me at the entrance. Yuma said as she started to run inside the school. Issei sighed and did the same. He went to the second floor and entered the classroom. And just when the bell rang, he sat on his chair and waited for the Ms. Keiko to enter. After school, once classes ended, Issei put his books inside his bag and exited the classroom. He was one of the last ones to leave the classroom. He walked down the stairs and was met with Yuma. Hello, Issei. Are you ready to go? She asked him. Issei nodded. They both exited the school gates and took a right. They were both walking in silence, the sound of their breathing enough for Issei. Partner, you know that she's a fallen, right? Ddraig asked his partner. Issei nodded mentally. Good. She may have some information on him. Just be on your guard. Ddraig said, falling back to sleep for the time being. Suddenly, Yuma stopped walking. Issei kept walking, but turned around once he noticed that she wasn't walking next to him. Issei, can I ask you something important? Yuma asked while slowly walking towards him. Issei nodded. Once she was close enough, she leaned towards his ear. Can you die for me? She whispered in his ear. Issei wasn't shocked by her question. He expected her to ask him sooner or later. But he decided to play for a little while and nodded his head. Yuma gave an evil smirk and her school uniform began to disappear, replaced by a short black dress with a small, light purple jacket on top. 2 feathery wings came out of her back. Good. This makes it easier for me. Any last words before you die, Issei? She asked with an evil laugh. Issei put a hand on his chin and pretended to think. He then shook his head. Oh well. Goodbye, Issei. May you rot in the darkest pits of the underworld. She said while forming a light spear in her left hand. One last thing. My name is Rainer. I used Yuma as a fake one to get around. She said. She then threw the spear, which successfully impaled Issei in the chest. Ha 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 ha. Kokabiel will be happy with this. Rainer said, laughing. Once she looked at Issei, she noticed something strange. The light spear she threw impaled him in the chest, but he was still standing. Suddenly, Issei grabbed the spear and pulled it out of his chest. He looked at it for a small while, before throwing it to the side. It instantly disappeared. What? I killed you? How are you still standing? Rainer asked in shock. But she soon put another smirk and summoned another spear in her hand. No matter. This one will kill you for sure. She said as she threw it at him. This one hit him in the shoulder, but like the previous one, he pulled it out. How are you still alive, you worthless human? Rainer asked in anger and shock. She threw 2 more spears, one hitting him in the abdomen and the other hitting him in his stomach. Like the previous 2, he pulled them out and threw them aside. What the hell are you? You're not human. Rainer screamed. Issei grew tired of the situation. He slowly started to approach Rainer. Stay where you are. She screamed as she threw even more light spears, but didn't manage to hit her target. Enough of this. I'll see you again, you human worm. She said as she took flight. Will you thank Azazel that I managed to get away from that whatever he was? Rainer said to herself. For some reason, she stopped going forward, even though her wings were flapping. She also felt something grab her legs. She turned around and saw Issei, with a pair of 2 red wings on his back and a red dragon gauntlet on his right hand. You're a dragon, Rainer screamed. Issei then turned around and looked at the road. He then threw Rainer back down. Once she made contact with the road, a large crater was formed. She tried to stand up, but Issei put his foot on her back, preventing her from getting up. Issei then grabbed both of her wings and began to pull them. No. Please, not my wings. I'll do anything, just please don't pull them off. Rainer pleaded, but her pleads fell on deaf ears. Issei began to pull harder, while Rainer's screams filled his own pleasure. He then stopped pulling for a second, pulling them suddenly that they teared at her back. Rainer screamed in pain as she began rolling on the ground. Issei then grabbed her hair and pulled her back to where he was. He held her head in place so that she was looking directly in his eyes. Rainer, if you value your life, you will answer to this one simple question. If you say what we need to hear, we'll let you go. But if you give us a wrong answer, then Issei will have no other choice but to kill you. The question is, where is Kokabiel hiding? Ddraig said from the gauntlet. I'll never answer to you. Rainer screamed. Ddraig gave a small sigh. Then I guess we have no choice. Partner, kill her. Ddraig said, his voice falling quiet. Issei then grabbed her by the throat and began to choke her. Rainer summoned a light spear in her hand and began to stab Issei's shoulder, but this did not make Issei stop. Rainer found herself losing consciousness as she let the light spear she was holding drop to the ground. Her eyes began to roll to the back of her head. Issei, deciding to stop toying with her, pressed a little harder on her throat. He finally heard that satisfying snap of her neck. Issei let go of her throat, letting her lifeless body fall to the ground. Issei gave a small sigh. He was a little disappointed that he didn't manage to get information on Kokabiel's location. He picked up his school bag and began walking the rest of the way to his house. Once arriving to his house, he dropped his bag on the floor and went upstairs to the bathroom. He grabbed a piece of cloth and the bottle of povidone. He applied some to the cloth and took his shirt off so he could disinfect his wounds. He applied the povidone on his chest, then his shoulder, then his abdomen and then his stomach. Once he was finished, he picked up 3 bandages and rolled them to where he was injured. After he was done, he went back to his room. He lied down on his bed and looked up to his ceiling. Today was somewhat of an interesting day for him. He began to wonder what other surprises were in store for him tomorrow. He decided not to think about it as he was tired. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep slumber. Issei opened his eyes and sat up on his bed. It was one of those rare occasions where he didn't get the nightmare and was allowed to sleep for once. He stood up from his bed and walked to the bathroom. He undid the bandages and applied a bit more povidone on his wounds. He opened his medicine cabinet and grabbed 3 new pairs of bandages. He rolled them to where his injuries were. Once he did that, he grabbed his shirt from his bedroom and headed downstairs into his kitchen. He wasn't hungry at all, so he decided to skip breakfast for today. He looked at a clock on the wall and noticed that it was 7:13. It was time for him to go to school. He went to the door and put his shoes on. He then grabbed his bag and put the spare key inside it. He slung the bag over his shoulder and exited his house. After walking for about a minute, he noticed that Rainer's body was still on the road. He looked to his left, then to his right and finally behind him. He grabbed Rainer and slung her dead body over his shoulder with ease. Since he wasn't that far away from his house, it was a good idea to drop her there and maybe dispose of her body in the weekend. He opened his door with his key and threw Rainer inside. He closed the door and locked it. He then began walking towards the school. Of course, there was nothing he could do about the large crater, but at least no one would see a dead body lying in the middle of the road. Once he arrived at school, he looked at the giant clock that was on the school. From what he could tell, the time was 7:26. He still had 4 minutes till class, so he should hurry up a little. He entered the building and right off the bat, he noticed that the 2 perverts from yesterday were running for their lives. They were being chased by 2 girls that were yukatas and in the hands were kendo sticks. "Come back here, you perverts," one of the girls shouted. "You're not getting away from us that easily," the other one shouted. "Ah, please spare us. Hey new guy, protect us from the evil girls," Mitsuda said as he and Motohama hid behind Issei. Once the girls noticed that they were hiding behind Issei, they stopped dead in their tracks. They looked at him and started to back off a little. Issei knew that they were scared of him. But he decided to give the 2 girls what they wanted. He grabbed Mitsuda and Motohama by the collar of their shirt and dragged them forwards as they screamed for him to stop. Issei dropped them right in front of the 2 girls and walked off towards the stairs. He heard one of them mutter a thank you. He then heard the perverted duo scream in pain as the sound of kendo sticks coming in contact with the 2 perverts echoed throughout the school. Before he could start walking up the stairs, he saw the same girl from yesterday, the one that was staring at him. She looked at him with her gold eyes. During lunch break, come to the old school building. The president of the occult research club wants to speak with you, the girl said as she started to walk the other direction. Issei looked at the girl weirdly and shrugged his shoulders. He didn't want to go, but at the same time, something was a little off about her. Well, obviously she's a devil partner. Ddraig's voice rang inside Issei's head. Issei hasn't seen a devil before, but by what Ddraig taught him over the past 10 years. He told him all about the fallen angels, the devils, the exorcists and the angels. But he decided to push the meeting into the back of his head as he entered the classroom. And just in time before the bell rang. He sat down on his usual sit as Ms. Keiko entered the classroom. "Alright, take out your mathematics book and your mathematics notebook. We are going to work on some slops," Ms. Keiko said. During lunch, once lunch arrived, Issei decided that he would first buy his usual lunch. When he finishes, he'll head out for the old school building, which he could easily see from outside. He went to the canteen and bought himself 2 pieces of white bread. He then went to his usual spot under the tree. He opened the first pack of white bread and took a bite. As he was eating, his mind began to travel to the small meeting that he was about to have with the orc. Of course, he didn't know what to expect. That white-haired girl that he saw earlier was supposed to be a devil, by Ddraig standards. So, he could suspect that she's not the only devil inside the school. Maybe there are more in the old school building, or the orc. He finished his first white bread and then looked at the other. He decided to eat the last one on his way home, so he stuffed it in his pocket. He stood up and made his way to the old school building. Once arriving, he raised his guard in case of a sneak attack. He doubted that they would attack him in school territory, but he still needed to be careful. He stood outside of the door and waited a bit. He then grabbed the handle and opened the door, closing it once he entered. He looked in front of him and saw the small white-haired girl waiting for him and a set of stairs. "Follow me," she said as she walked up the stairs. Issei followed her up the stairs while looking at his surroundings. The building looked more of a mansion, despite how it looked outside. Once they reached the top of the stairs, they walked forward. They reached a pair of 2 doors. The white-haired girl opened one of the doors and went inside, Issei following. He closed the door. In the room was a big coffee table that had trays of sweets and tea. There was a big desk at the end of the room, and behind it was a red-haired girl. "We're back, President Riaz," the white-haired girl said as she sat down on one of the sofas in the room. She then grabbed a chocolate biscuit from a small tray and started to eat it. "Good job, Kaneko," a red-haired girl said that was behind the desk. She looked at Issei with a smile. "So you must be the transfer student that I heard so much about." "As you heard from Kaneko, my name is IsseiXHarem. Since there are a few more of us, would you prefer to meet them first, or would you like me to start with the question now?" Riaz asked, a smile still on her face. Issei just shrugged, not caring either way. "Since I have a little work to do, you can sit down and relax for the meantime," Riaz said as she continued what she was doing. Issei walked to sit down on the sofa opposite of Kaneko. He relaxed in his sit and looked up at the ceiling. He gave a small sigh and closed his one eye. He could sense it. The red-haired girl is a devil as well. And a pretty powerful one too. "Remember my name. My name is Kokabiel." Kokabiel's voice rang inside Issei's head. Issei opened his eye, still staring at the ceiling. He began to hear their voices again. "Issei, run as fast as you, California," his mother's voice then ranged inside his head. Issei gritted his teeth. This was the aftermath of not having the nightmare, not that he wouldn't hear the voices if he did have the nightmare. But he still hated it. Still alive. For a human, you don't die as easily. But that doesn't matter. I'll end your life now. Kokabiel's voice rang once more. Issei gave a low growl, which thankfully no one heard. He tried to force the voices to go quiet for the meantime, and he succeeded. Just then, he heard the door open. He looked towards the direction of the door and he saw 2 people walking in, a boy with short blonde hair and blue eyes, and a girl with long black hair that was in a ponytail and violet eyes, which resembled Rainer a bit. "Ah, you're all here. Good. Now we can start the meeting," Riaz said, smiling. As she said that, all except Issei went near the big desk that Riaz was. "Let's start by introducing ourselves again. My name is IsseiXHarem," Riaz said with a small bow. "Kaneko Taoju," Kaneko said in her normal monotone voice. "My name is Udo Kiba, pleasure to meet you," Kiba said, also with a bow. "And my name is Akeno Hinajima," Akeno said with a smile. "Now, from what I heard around the school, your name is IsseiXHarem, correct?" Riaz asked. Issei nodded. "Now, from what Kaneko told me yesterday, you fought and successfully killed a fallen angel. I want to thank you for that. But the real question is, are you a threat to us devils?" Riaz asked, as hers and the other members' black wings emerged from their backs. Issei looked at them for a small while. He looked down at his right arm and saw a green light. He extended his arm forward and the red gauntlet appeared on his arm. The boosted gear Riaz trailed off with shock. IsseiXHarem, Ddraig's voice was heard from the gauntlet. "Red Dragon Emperor?" Riaz asked in shock as the other's eyes widened. "Yes, it is me. As you probably already know by now, Haidu Issei is my host. And to answer your previous question, if you do not get in our way during our small quest, then you will be recognized as an ally. But if you somewhat interfere, then we will have no choice but to attack," Ddraig said. "Curious question. What exactly is your quest?" Riaz asked with a brow raised. Ddraig went silent for a moment. "Partner, do you want me to say?" Ddraig asked Issei. Issei gave a long sigh and surprisingly nodded his head. "Very well then. Our quest is to find a fallen angel by the name of Kokabiel," Ddraig said. Again, Riaz and the rest's eyes widened at the revelation. "You want to find one of the leaders of the fallen angels, for what exact purpose?" Riaz asked. "Revenge." It was the only word that escaped from the gauntlet. "Revenge? Why? What exactly happened?" Riaz asked. "It is not my place to answer you that, IsseiXHarem. Perhaps my partner might tell you, if he is able to speak, that is," Ddraig said, causing the members of the orc to raise their brows. "Wait, I just realized that Issei hasn't spoken yet. Does that have something to do with what you said?" This time, Akeno asked. "The last time that I heard him talk was about 10 years ago," Ddraig said. Riaz, who was taking a sip of her tea, widened her eyes and started to cough. The others just stared wide eyes at Issei. 10 whole years without uttering a single word, is that even possible? Riaz, who has now stopped coughing, asked the gauntlet. "When you shut out the entire world and focus your mind on one thing and one thing only, you too would be shocked by that changes you go through. Partner was a normal human who had a good life, but that only lasted 7 years. Ddraig said. Everyone was silent. They didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, Riaz stood up and walked to Issei. She grabbed one of his hands and put it close to her chest. Is there anything we can do to fix him? Riaz asked, surprising everyone in the room, save for Issei. Riaz, Gremory and the rest, would you like to know what my partner's last words were before he went into silence? Ddraig asked, surprising everyone in the room again. They pulled a little closer to hear Ddraig speak. Yes, it's something that I would definitely want to know now. Riaz said. She was surprised by herself. She didn't expect to feel that much concern for just one person. Very well then. And to answer your previous question, I think my partner is way far gone for him to be fixed. The reason is because of his final words before falling into silence. Ddraig said. Everyone was basically at the edge of their seats, waiting for Ddraig to speak. His last words to me were, once I find and kill Kokabiel, my life will no longer have any meaning. That's right, Ddraig, once everything is finished I'll end my own life and join my parents in the afterlife. Ddraig spoke Issei's last words to the orc. There were a few moments of silence in the room when suddenly, everyone screamed at once. Issei was walking home after his meeting with the orc. After Draig's statement, Riaz said that she would like to prevent Issei from taking his own life, if possible. The others agreed to help as well. Issei gave a long sigh. He just didn't understand as to why she'd like to help someone like him. He was even surprised by her offer. Turning him into a devil and joining her peerage. Issei thought about it, but in the end, shook his head, declining her offer. He still remembers her disappointed look. But she understood and let him go, but she also said that the offer would still stand. He took out his spare key and opened his door. He closed it and locked it. He let his school bag drop to the floor as he looked at the body in front of him. Since tomorrow was Saturday, he could go and bury her body near the end of the day. He went to his fridge and grabbed milk. He put it on his table and went to one of the cupboards, grabbing a bowl. He then grabbed some chocolate-flavored cereal. He poured the cereal in the bowl. The milk then followed. He grabbed a spoon from a drawer and went to sit on the sofa, opening the TV. As he sat down, his mind wandered to one of the agreements that Ddraig accepted. Riaz accepted the fact that he didn't want to become a devil, but she then proposed in joining the occult research club. Issei was about to decline, but Ddraig beat him to it, accepting the offer. Partner, as much as I want to believe that you can kill Kokabiel by yourself, I am having few doubts as well. Without help, then it would take months, maybe years for us to find Kokabiel alone. But since they are devils and enemies of the fallen, then it could work as an advantage for us. They hunt down a fallen and they contact you. You try and get some information and then you kill them at the end. Sounds good to you, partner? Ddraig explained his reason to Issei. Issei thought about it for a while, but he agreed in the end. True, he is good at working alone, but him finding Kokabiel alone might take a few years. But with help, it could lower the time of the search. After finishing his cereal, he looked at the clock on the wall. The time was 10:43. He put the bowl in the sink and filled it with water. He then went upstairs to take a bath. He took his clothes off with the bandages. Before entering, he looked at the wounds that were caused by Rainer. They were all closed. Since he was now a dragon, his wounds heal 3 times faster than the original human time. He entered the bath and began washing himself. Hehehe, you can take all the medicine you want, but you will never get rid of me. I will always be in your self-conscious. I will always be here to torment you. Hahaha, I can see your struggle. Nothing escapes from me, not even you. Issei clutched the side of his head as he exited the bath. He knew he forgot to take something these past 2 days. He forgot to take his medicine. After the incident with Kokabiel, Issei's uncle took him to the doctor. After an examination, the doctor said that he was suffering from depression, extreme paranoia and maybe dementia. But the most worrying was schizophrenia. His uncle asked how the schizophrenia was triggered. The doctor said that it might have been during the incident. There is no known single cause of schizophrenia, said the doctor to Issei's uncle. The uncle then asked if there were any other illnesses or trauma that he could be aware of. One issue that the doctor said to be careful on was of a panic attack, since he did experience the death of his family. The doctor then gave Issei some pills. He said to take 3 every day, at breakfast, during lunch and at dinner. The good thing, Issei managed to get self-control over his panic attacks over the last few years, which caused them to be quite rare. His schizophrenia was the only serious problem, aside from his depression, extreme paranoia and maybe his dementia. Issei dried himself in a towel and quickly went downstairs. He grabbed a cup and filled it with water. Issei then opened one of the drawers and grabbed his bottle of Thorazine. He put one down his throat and soon drank the water. Hehehe, you can't get rid of me, see you soon, Issei, hahaha. It was all that the voice said before going silent. Issei gave a small sigh of relief as the voice finally quieted down. For now at least. Issei went upstairs to his room and fell on his bed. He soon fell into a deep slumber. Inside Issei's dream, Issei's eyes snapped wide open. The first thing he noticed was that he was in the school's courtyard. He looked around, but there was nothing. Only the school and the blue skies with white clouds. Suddenly, the sky turned red and the clouds turned black. Issei then felt a sharp pain on his chest. He looked down and saw a sword that was impaled in his chest. Issei shakily turned and saw no one. So the brat from 10 years ago is still alive. I must say I'm impressed. A voice said. Shadows began to form a figure in front of Issei. First were the legs, then the arms, then the torso and then the wings. The man had long black hair, red eyes and from what Issei could count 10 black feathery wings on his back. Issei recognized him easily. It was Kokabiel. It was what I expected from the holder of the boosted gear and the host of the Red Dragon Emperor. But I want to at least get a good fight out of you. Kokabiel shouted with a grin on his face. Before Issei could blink, he found himself on the floor, deep cuts all over his body. He saw Kokabiel walking towards him with a grin on his face. Kokabiel had blood coming down his forehead and his lip was also bleeding. I must say that I'm somewhat disappointed in you. I expected you to at least put up a good fight. But it seems I expected a bit too much. Oh well, this time you won't be able to revive yourself, so that is another brat down the drain. Kokabiel said as he summoned the light spear in his hand. He raised his hand in the air, impaled it into Issei's head. End of dream, Issei gasped as he sat up on his bed. Sweat was trickling down his forehead as he let out short shaky breaths. Calm down, partner. It was just another nightmare. But this one seemed more realistic. But let's not think about that right now. Breathe, try to relax. Ddraig instructed Issei on what to do during his small panic attack. Issei gave a sigh of relief, feeling better now. But he agreed with Ddraig on one thing. That nightmare seemed realistic. It was almost as if it was trying to tell him something. But he decided that it was another nightmare, so it probably meant nothing. Issei stood up and went to the bathroom. He took a quick shower and went downstairs to make himself breakfast. He had enough to make himself a bowl of rice, so he probably should go to the store and buy more. Issei then filled a cup with water and took one Thorazine pill. He put it in his mouth and drank the water. He gave a sigh and sat down on his couch, rubbing his eyes. Since there was no school today, Issei decided to spend the day home and then bury Rainer's body at night. But for now, he'll go buy some stuff that he needed. He took his key and exited his house. As he was walking, Issei still couldn't get his mind off that dream he saw. It was strange. He felt like he should be more cautious now. Issei managed to push his thoughts to the back of his head as he entered the store. After buying the stuff that he needed, he exited the store and walked back to his house. Stand still, I'll make you feel better. Trust me. Issei heard a voice say from right across the street. Issei looked at the direction of the voice and saw a girl kneel down with her hands extended towards a bow that was about 8 years old. The girl was wearing a white veil on her head and a black teal nun outfit. She had long blonde hair. Suddenly a green glow emitted from the girl's hands. After a few seconds, the boy stood up with a happy grin on his face. He looked down at the nun. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Mrs. The boy said. He then ran off. The nun stared at the bow with a happy smile herself. Issei was surprised by her healing ability. He realized that it was a sacred gear and a pretty powerful one as well. If my guess is correct, partner, then her sacred gear is twilight healing. And just like your boosted gear, hers is pretty rare. Ddraig said. Issei crossed the road and approached the kneeled nun. The nun looked up and saw Issei staring at her. Can I help you with something? The nun asked slowly, a stutter in her voice. Issei extended his hand to her. The nun smiled and gladly accepted his hand. Now that Issei was closer to her, he saw that she had green eyes. The nun looked at him with a smile. Thank you. Let me introduce myself, my name is IsseiXHarem. It's a pleasure to meet you. What's your name? Asia asked with a small bow. Issei gave a small bow as well. Issei cleared his throat but ended up coughing heavily. It's been a while since he cleared his throat from the mucus that he had since the last 10 years that he spoke. Ah. Are you okay? Do you need help? Asia screamed in worry. Issei only raised his hand as he stopped to cough. He gave a sigh of relief as he recovered from his cough attack. Thank God, you're okay. Now can you please give me your name so that God can give you his love? Asia asked with a relived smile. Issei pointed at his throat, or more importantly, his vocal cords. He pointed at them and shook his head. What does that mean? You can't speak? Asia asked. Issei shook his head. You haven't spoken in a while? Asia asked once more. This time, Issei nodded. So your voice is basically gone. How sad. Asia said in a sad tone. Issei nodded as if saying thanks for the concern. He then started to walk away from Asia. Ah, wait. Asia shouted. Issei turned to look at her with a raised brow. Since I'm new in town and I don't know my way, can you possibly show me the way towards the nearest church? There's someone I have to meet there. Asia asked shyly, with a small blush on her face. Issei had a small feeling that it was more than one person who she was going to meet, but he still decided to help her. He nodded his head and walked back to her, mentioning with his finger to follow him. Asia nodded and followed Issei. She looked up at him and stared at the two scars that were visible. The one on his neck and the one on his right eye. She wanted to ask him how he got them, but she knew he wouldn't answer her, since it's been a while since he last spoke. Suddenly, Issei heard a loud grumble. He turned towards Asia, who was holding her stomach with her hands, while her head was down in embarrassment, a huge blush on her cheeks. Issei could have sworn that he felt the side of his left lip inching up to a barely noticeable smile, which surprised him. He didn't even know that he had the ability to smile. But, it lasted for only a millisecond, so he still has a way to go. He mentioned for Asia to follow him to a fast food court. Issei bought himself a cheeseburger. He bought another cheeseburger for Asia. They decided to sit outside. As Issei was eating his burger, he noticed Asia looking at her food. He tapped her shoulder so he could get her attention. Asia looked at Issei, and Issei stared at her with a raised brow. This may sound like a stupid question, but how do you eat this? I've never actually seen this type of food. Asia said, looking to the left shyly. Issei then grabbed his cheeseburger, and Asia looked at him. Issei then took a bite out of the burger and chewed slowly. He then looked at Asia. Is that how you eat it? Asia asked. Issei only nodded. Asia grabbed the burger with her hands and took a small bite. Her eyes widened as she looked at the burger with stars in her eyes. This is so delicious. I never ate something as delicious as this. Asia said as she took another bite of her burger. Just like before, Issei's lips went up to another barely noticeable smile. It lasted for only half a millisecond. After they ate their lunch, Issei then led her to the nearby church. Once outside, Asia turned to Issei with a smile on her face. Thank you for showing me the way to the church. I hope we meet again soon. May God be with you. Asia said as she entered the church. Issei was a little suspicious about what was in that church. He knew that there was more than one person that Asia was going to meet, but what were they? Were they fallen angels? Haha, it looks like you worry too much about little Asia. Why is that? You never cared for anyone but your own. Why start caring now? Issei shook his head. There was no way that an innocent girl like her would associate with monsters like the fallen angels. Maybe she really was just going to meet another priest. But for whatever reason, he decided to agree with the voice. Issei decided to push his worries away and decided to go back home. There was nothing else to do. Ah, hello Issei. Didn't expect to see you here. Issei heard a voice from behind him. Issei looked over his shoulder and saw Rias walking towards him. She wore the same attire that she wore yesterday. Issei raised his shopping bag, saying that he only came here to shop. I just came here to take a small walk for fresh air. Also, you could say that I was watching you a little. And I saw you walking with that nun. Ria said nervously as she saw the look that Issei gave her once she said that she was watching him. I just want you to know that nuns are associated with most angels, and since angels are enemies to us devils, then I would suggest that you stay away from her. Rias continued. Issei then extended his right arm forwards. Rias Gremory. Of course, we know the devils are enemies of angels and fallen angels are the same. But you forget, Issei is no devil. We may be associated with you, but that does not mean that we are at your side. Ddraig said. Then on which side are you? Rias asked. That is a stupid question. You should already know that we are on no one's side, expect our own. Of course, we appreciate the help that you will give us, but other than that, you are just a temporary ally. After Issei's quest is over, you know what will happen. Ddraig said. And I already said that I'll do what I can in order to prevent that. Ria said seriously. You can try, but I doubt anything will change my partner's choice at this point. Ddraig said. Issei then looked up at the sky. He saw that the sky was starting to get orange. He was quickly reminded that he should go bury Rainer in a few hours. Well, I think it's about time we depart. There is a fallen angel that we have to bury. Ddraig said. Issei started to walk away. Can I help you with that? Rias asked hopefully. Issei looked at her a little strangely. After a small while, he sighed and nodded his head, mentioning to follow him. Rias smiled and followed Issei. Issei was more than comfortable with walking in silence. He actually preferred it. When they arrived at Issei's house, Issei took his key out and opened the door. The first thing that caught Ria's attention was of course the dead fallen angel that was near the entrance. The second thing that caught her attention and worried her a little was a bottle of medicine that was on the kitchen's dining table. Issei mentioned her to wait here and he went upstairs, leaving Rias alone for the moment. Ria's curiosity got the better of her as she approached the dining table. She grabbed the medicine tab and looked at the label. From what she could tell, the medicine was named Thorazine. She then heard steps coming down the stairs. Rias quickly put the medicine to where she found it and went back to where she was before. When Issei came downstairs, he was holding a large bag and a shovel. Issei grabbed Rainer and stuffed her in the bag. He closed the bag and tossed it over his shoulder. Do you know where you want to bury her? Riaz asked. There is a small yard behind Issei's house. It would be a good place to bury her, just as long as nobody sees, Ddraig said. I can easily cover you. Riaz said, confident. Ddraig said nothing. They both went to the backyard through a door in the living room. Issei began to dig down a small hole. Once he was sure that it was deep enough, he grabbed the bag with Rainer inside and tossed her inside the hole. Issei. Can I ask you a question? Riaz asked, nervous. Issei stopped pouring dirt in the hole and looked at Riaz. Riaz was sweating a little. She didn't know how he would react when she tells him that she saw him medicine. She gave a nervous sigh to calm herself. What is Thorazine? I saw the medicine on your dining table, so I got curious. Riaz asked. Once she looked at Issei, she instantly regretted asking him. He was just staring at her, a very dead look in his eyes. He finished pouring dirt in the hole. Once giving the pile 2 pats with a shovel, Issei turned his attention back at Riaz, slowly approaching her. Once Issei gave 2 pats on the pile of dirt with his shovel, he slowly walked to Riaz with a dangerous look in his eyes. Riaz took a few steps backwards. Issei, please tell me. Riaz said with a ting of fear in her voice. Issei ignored her and extended his hand to the right, his boosted gear appearing. Riaz Gremory, have you ever heard of a thing called privacy of personal space? I'm sure your parents raised you correctly, so they must have taught you a few things. But since you found out, then I guess it's only fair that I tell you. And partner, I can tell that you want to kill her. Please refrain from doing so. Ddraig said. Issei gave a sigh in disappointment that he couldn't kill her, but complied with Ddraig for now. Now after getting his scars, Issei was rushed to the thing you human call hospital. After checking him and making sure that all his injuries were treated, they examined him to see if he had any sort of illnesses. After that, the doctor said that he had depression, which I'm sure all of you have noticed by now. He has extreme paranoia, panic attacks, and he may have dementia. But his most serious one is probably why he has to take these pills. Ddraig said. What does he have that make him have to take those pills? Riaz asked a little hesitantly. He has schizophrenia. Ddraig said. What? Riaz screamed in shock. No reason to be loud. Most of the time, my partner controls it. By taking those pills, it keeps the voice quiet for about 3 hours. He takes one every morning during breakfast, one during lunch and one after dinner. Then what about his dementia? Riaz asked, recovering from her shock. From what I have witnessed over the last 10 years, my partner never had a change of personality. He was just quiet as always. From what the doctors said, my partner had vascular dementia. He has yet to show the other symptoms, such as memory problems, trouble speaking or understanding speech, recognizing sights and sounds, being confused or agitated, and a problem of walking and having frequent falls. Ddraig said. So he might not have dementia after all. Riaz asked. That may be so, yes, Ddraig said. Ddraig then went silent, waiting for Riaz's response. Well, dementia or no dementia, I promise that I'll stay by your side, Issei. Me and the others are going to help you through with your depression and with your revenge. But I regret to say that your battle with schizophrenia is yours. I can't do anything about that. Riaz finished regrettably. Issei stood there, a little surprised. He thought that she would run away from him, saying to never approach her again. But instead she'll stay close by his side. Though he still shouldn't probably trust her. She might have said that, but she might end up stabbing him in the back. So Issei only nodded in thanks, but it was probably fake. Riaz smiled with a small blush on her face. She then spread her devilish wings and flew away. Issei sighed and went inside his house. He went to his fridge and opened it, grabbing an apple. He opened the television and sat down on the couch, taking a bite out of the apple. After a small while, his mind began to travel back to the nun that he helped today. Just being with her for about 2 hours, she managed to make him smile for the first time in 10 years. Even if it was for a millisecond, it was still a smile nonetheless. But then, his mind traveled to the church that he took her. Something seemed kind of off about that place. It was like something dark and evil were behind those doors of the church. Who knows, he might just be overreacting about the whole situation, but still, it's okay to ponder. Issei rubbed his one eye and closed the television. He stood up and filled a cup with water. He put the pill in his mouth and drank the water. Issei went upstairs and took a shower. He then went to his bedroom to get himself some sleep. The next day, Issei woke up, blinking a few times at the rays of sunlight hitting his face. Just like 2 days ago, no nightmare. He yawned quietly and got out of bed. He went downstairs and cooked some fried pork with ginger, rice and miso soup. After finishing breakfast, he took his medicine and sat on his couch, wondering what to do today. He could either go for a walk around town to relax a little bit or try and find Asia. After questioning his choices, he decided to go look for Asia. He took his key with him and exited his house. His first target was of course where he first saw her, and that was the park. After arriving at the park, he saw her sitting on one of the benches, just looking around. He approached her silently. Issei tapped her shoulder once, making her jump in surprise. Once she saw who it was, she relaxed and smiled. "Ah, I've been looking for you. I wanted to see you again," Asia said shyly. Issei looked at her with a little bit of surprise behind his eye. He suppressed the urge to smile. "I wanted to go have lunch with you once more. Is that okay with you?" Asia asked with a smile and blush. Issei nodded and mentioned for her to follow him. "Could we eat at the same place where you first treated me? I enjoyed the food," Asia said with a happy smile. Issei only nodded. After arriving at the burger joint they went yesterday, they ordered their burgers. Asia ordered a cheeseburger like last time, while Issei bought a teriyaki burger. I know you haven't spoken in a while, but I was wondering if I could maybe heal your throat," Asia said, looking to the left. Issei looked at her. He thought about being able to talk again. But in the end, he shook his head, saying no. "Why not?" Asia asked. Issei only shrugged his shoulders. He didn't know why he refused to let her heal him, but he thought it was for the best. After finishing their lunch, Issei and Asia walked around the town for a bit. Since Asia was new in town, it was a good chance to show her a little bit of the city. After walking for about 10 minutes, Asia suddenly stopped and looked at what looked to be an arcade. Issei stopped walking once he noticed that Asia wasn't beside him. He turned back and saw her looking at the arcade. "I haven't seen an arcade before. I have heard of them, but haven't actually seen one. Can we go in?" Asia asked with hopeful eyes. Issei nodded and led her inside the arcade. Once inside, Asia's eyes light up at the sight. There were many types of racing games, classic games and many more. "This is amazing," Asia said with excitement. Issei looked at her and then looked at the ground. He smiled for a second and then went back to his normal depressed look. After showing Asia around and playing a few games, it was time for them to leave. Asia then suddenly stopped and looked at the claw crane. Issei looked at her and saw her staring at a doll inside the machine. "Oh, that doll is so cute," Asia said with a smile. Issei walked up next to her and saw the doll that she was staring. He pulled out a coin and inserted it inside the machine. He grabbed the joystick and moved the crane on top of the doll Asia wanted. He pushed a green button and the crane slowly lowered on top of the doll. The crane grabbed the doll and moved it towards a hole in the lower right corner. The crane let the doll drop in the hole. Issei grabbed it from the small door at the bottom of the machine and gave it to Asia. "Thank you very much, Issei," Asia said with a happy smile on her face as she hugged her new doll. Issei nodded at her and started to walk towards the exit. Again, he noticed Asia not following him. He looked behind him and saw Asia still hugging her doll, smiling and looking at the floor. But her smile wasn't the smile of someone happy. She had a sad smile on her face. Issei approached her slowly. Once he was close, Asia looked up at him. "Hey, are we friends?" Asia asked, looking straight into his eyes. Issei looked at her weirdly for a second, wondering as to why she would ask such a question. But nonetheless, he nodded. Asia looked at him for a second, still smiling sadly. She then looked at her doll. "I'm sorry for asking such a question. When I was born, I didn't know who my mother or my father was. I was an orphan. After being given the sacred gear, Twilight Healing, I became the holy priestess." "Wait, you do know what a sacred gear is, right?" Asia asked, a little worried. Issei nodded. "How do I know that you are not lying?" Asia asked. Issei looked around and saw that nobody was around them. He extended his right hand forward and his boosted gear appeared. Asia gave a real smile this time, but it quickly went back to the sad one she was wearing earlier. "After becoming the holy priestess, I met a devil. I don't remember his name though. Anyway, I found him at the blink of death and I had no other choice but to heal him. After the nuns learned about me healing a devil, they banished me from the church. I have been traveling ever since." Asia finished sadly. Issei looked at her, signs of pity evident in his eyes. He then walked up to Asia and put his hands on her shoulders. This action caused Asia to look up at him with wide eyes. Issei then moved one of his hands to the back of her neck and pulled her close, hugging her. Asia was a little surprised by Issei's action, but she was happy at the same time. They stayed there hugging for a couple of minutes, Issei deciding to break apart. Asia was a little disappointed that the hug was finished. But she gave a happy smile nonetheless. "Thank you, Issei. Thank you for listening to me and thank you for being my first friend," Asia said, tears of happiness trickling down her face. Issei wiped her tears with his fingers and gave her another quick hug. He then grabbed her hand and they walked out of the arcade, holding hands. It might have not been the most exciting day, but it was a happy day because Issei now had a new friend. End of the part 1. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.